Well, like most people on here, I've kind of felt like I had to talk about the new Little Mermaid movie. While doing prep for it, I wanted to go back and watch the '89 classic animated version first, which I'd always loved. And you know what? All it did was make me angrier, and the whole time I was watching, one phrase kept running around in my head: cultural vandalism. Let's face it, Disney has mostly made its fortune off the back of other creators, and has done so since the earliest long-form cartoon. So many of the Disney animated movies we consider classics are just old fables or fairy tales or stories written by others. I mean, that's not to diminish what the Disney creatives did with them back then, turning them into lasting, beautiful movies in most cases. It's just to say that not everything they created was their original thought. And modern Disney is far worse. In addition to having continued that trend of using old works when they bother to create something under their own banner, they have now gone out and purchased whole companies that brought with them entire catalogs of IP, from Pixar to Marvel to Lucasfilm to the gargantuan $71 billion purchase of all film and TV assets held by 21st Century Fox back in 2019. And we've already seen the mouseification of properties from most of those companies. But even that level of creative bankruptcy wasn't enough. Although live-action reimaginings of classic animated movies they'd done in the past began back in the 90s and went through the 2000s, it wasn't until 2015's Cinderella did Disney simply decide to just completely remake their previous animated movies into live-action versions. And if you're about to ask, hey baby, why would they do that? Was it solely about the money? Yeah, obviously. These were, and still are, just soulless cash grabs, knowing they had once had an audience for this IP they own. So instead of just releasing it into the theater, something they'd always done routinely in the past, by the way, the new gimmick was to just remake them as live action. Disney is a creatively bankrupt company coasting off the work of others, either in the form of franchises they simply bought, or their own past in-house creatives, which in many cases created things they now routinely apologize for. But is that all? No, I wish it was. Disney hasn't been content buying all those properties from other studios and making content with an eye to make fans of those IPs happy. The thing you'd think they'd want to do, what with it having been such a gigantic investment and all. Nope. They've used these new franchises as vehicles to foist their desired modern worldview on the consumers. And with each passing year, and with each passing failed piece of content, they all get further and further away from what made them popular, which is just an indication that the very fans that made them valuable have begun walking away, after decades in most cases. But what about Disney's own original IP? Well, I mean, I'd point and laugh at Disney for going back and faithfully remaking all of their animated movies into live-action remakes to make a quick buck, but at least I'd applaud them for staying true to their own source material if they were doing that. But the same disease that swept over the purchased franchises Disney now owns has taken hold there as well, which brings us back specifically to The Little Mermaid. In addition to going back and watching the classic version, I watched a bunch of videos about the making of, and an absolutely perfect little 30-minute documentary produced for the Disney Channel back in '89, and released prior to the movie's release, and hosted by none other than Alyssa Milano. It's absolutely staggering, watching and listening to the difference in tone of all this stuff. There was no preaching, no politics, no pandering to anyone, no apologizing for the plot of the movie, which was a young, headstrong 16-year-old girl's desire to become a young woman and break free from her somewhat overbearing father's control, who falls in love with a boy. There was one goal here: make the best movie possible, which would appeal to the largest amount of people and be great entertainment for generations of children. I'm telling you, it's almost impossible to describe what a throwback it is to go and listen to when this was the only goal. I actually found myself waiting for the sermons, which just never came. And speaking of sermons, you're not imagining this. This isn't some conspiracy theory by mean old white guys on YouTube. Disney is proud to tell you why they're tearing apart our cultural heritage and changing everything you once loved. It would take well over an hour-long video going in-depth into all of it, but I'll go easy on you here and just provide a link to Disney's webpage that goes to great lengths trumpeting everything they're doing. I'll include it down in the description. It's a pretty deep dive, but rather than just continuing to wonder why Disney is doing what they're doing, given it makes no financial sense, I encourage you to spend an hour or more reading through the page. If this stuff is new to you, let me know in the comments section what you think about what you've read. Most people are absolutely floored when they first understand how far Disney has fallen from being simply a children's entertainment company to become a full-fledged propaganda arm for various political ideologies. And as for the classic 1989 version, it's just as remarkable and timeless as it always was. For the first time in 30 years, Disney decided to go back and make a movie based on a fairy tale, 1959 Sleeping Beauty having been the last one before then. In addition to going back to their roots in that way, the animators went back and really researched what made those movies special, what made them resonate with countless fans over the decades. Instead of utilizing rotoscope the way the animators had done in the past in order to get that wonderfully realistic motion out of characters, they came up with sort of a hybrid version where they filmed most of the movie using actors to get the movements and angles correct, and then allowed animators to fill in the blanks. It's a beautiful compromise that ended up giving us incredibly realistic movement, while at the same time allowing animators the freedom to add emotional weight and creativity throughout, something all of the modern live-action remakes have sorely lacked. And while most Disney classics were known for their music, they'd stepped that up here by bringing in longtime Broadway composers Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. The result were some of the best-known Disney songs of all time. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't remember most of them and found myself singing through most of the movie. But baby, you're likely saying, aren't you a ruggedly handsome 52-year-old white guy? How is it you like The Little Mermaid? It's a story about a 16-year-old girl falling in love and learning to break free from her father's control. Well, yeah, that's all true. I am that. But that's the thing with great storytelling, isn't it? If done well, I can empathize with any character. I don't have to be a 16-year-old mermaid to know what it's like to be a teenager in love any more than I need to be a spy for MI6 to imagine what it's like to be James Bond racing through the street of Monte Carlo in an Aston Martin, or be a hobbit in Middle-earth to see myself as Frodo and feel his anguish as he makes his way to Mount Doom, or be a warrant officer on board a spaceship to imagine being Ellen Ripley on the Nostromo as she tries to escape an alien. And I never needed to be black to emulate or see myself as any one of the hundreds of athletes or entertainers I grew up admiring. These stories and characters and people transcended all of that low-level, completely uninteresting horseshit like race and sex. And this was true for nearly everyone, and it's why all these stories and people had such huge, far-reaching impacts and actually diverse fans. If it was required seeing yourself on screen, where did all the black Star Wars fans come from over the years? Why did so many male sci-fi fans love Ripley, or Sarah Connor, or Leia? This is why I call what Disney is doing cultural vandalism. None of this was even remotely necessary. Even if you think their motives are pure, and I would argue vehemently that they are definitely not, the results are the same. They have taken it upon themselves to take what belonged to the world, these stories and characters, and go back and alter them, Orwell style, to better fit with their current version of what's correct. And when they don't outright change things, they apologize for them, and then have the audacity to stick their hands out and accept your money to watch the content they say they're ashamed of. Finally, I have no interest in giving some in-depth review of the new movie. I already know the hoops Disney forced itself to jump through long before anyone was even hired to create the thing, and none of it had a damn thing to do with making the best movie possible. I've seen all the clips and trailers, and all of them show a half-assed, DEI-laced abomination that is a joke compared to its predecessor. I'm good, thanks. What I would suggest doing, and I plan on making a full video discussing this very topic, is if you don't currently own hard copies of these classic movies you remember loving, go grab one immediately. And absolutely fucking not directly from the studios. You can find used Blu-rays or DVDs on eBay for less than $5, and they're fantastic. And that way you don't have to worry about the whims of some jackass at a studio deciding the movie you loved is problematic and needs to be edited or scrubbed entirely to conform with today's average Twitter activist. I have no interest in being this guy. Do you? I'm telling you, become your own video store or library before it's too late. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.